First, I want to thank the organizers of that symposium, Juliana and Katarina, to have invited me to that extraordinary meeting so I can discover both Leipzig and Grünau. I'll try to explain to you in half an hour why France has built so many grands ensembles, large housing estates, why France is among the capitalist Western country, the country where you can find so many large housing estates. I have to say I'm not an historian of architecture, neither an historian of urbanism. I'm an historian of social and political society. So maybe my point of view may be a little different from what you have heard before. And I apologize because I don't speak any German, nor understand a word, and my English is not so fluent. So we start. So I come from that place, which is not among grand ensembles at all. If you want to see what I've written about it, you can find it online. This is a MOOC, an online web lesson about Paris and suburbs, which also include the Grand Ensemble period. And I have directed a book with a colleague named Bourillon, which is called Agrandir Paris, Enlarge Paris. And this book is also online. You can find it on Open Edition book. And it includes the birth of Grand Ensemble around Paris. And I have directed a long time ago with some colleague of geography and sociology a book named Le Monde des Grands Ensembles to compare that urban form all over the world. So let's start. I'll try to explain why those housing estates have developed so much in France. You have an example in northern suburb of Paris, built in the 60s, in a place named Bondy, where you had some riots in 2007. I think to understand the French experience, you have to remember, I have to remind you that before the period of the building of large housing estates, which is in the second half of the 20th century, you have to remember France experienced two forms of public housing. Public housing in the interwar period built by local public office of social housing, and a very important period, which is the reconstruction of the bombed city by the MRU, Ministry of Reconstruction and Urbanism. Those two experiences, I think, explain for a part the choice that was made in the afterwar period. So I just show you some example of what was called, curiously, a garden city. This is the last garden city built in the Seine. The Seine is a suburb around Paris by the local public housing office. And it was called at the time the skyscrapers of Drancy. And it was considered as the example France should reach the same thing. You can't see them now because the tower have been blown away.
When did they blow away?
In the 70s. As another example of social housing in the suburb of Lyon, Villeurbanne, also les gratte-ciel, skyscrapers. And the other experience I wanted to mention, which is the reconstruction of the bombed city of the Second World War by the MRU, which means by the state, the Ministry of Reconstruction and Urbanism, which send urbanists, des urbanistes d'État, urbanists of the state, in the cities, and those urbanists discuss with the people, and generally, in most time, they impose to people what should be reconstructed with public loans, with public money. So it is reconstruction of another city, the reconstruction of Rouen, where the old quartier, central quartier, have been destroyed. And this experience is very, very important. Nevertheless, the Grands Ensembles have been built in a short period between 1953 to 1973. First of all, they became a massive public policy, first to solve the housing shortage problem, le problème des mal logés, le problème, la crise du logement, and to modernize the building industry. In a second time, I think they became a social project, a social and urban project, to modernize everybody's life, domestic life of workers and middle class, and also to modernize old industrial suburbs which were around the towns. Or it is the same thing, it is a sum up of what I said. This policy in the 70s was able to produce a lot of new flats, a lot of new lodging, 500,000 a year. It has never been dépassé. So first, the first aspect is, I think, housing estates is first a urban project of the Trente Glorieuses period. Trente Glorieuses is a period of economic growth. The idea is to modernize the new regime, the Republic, born after the resistance period and after the collapse of France in 1940. All politicians, architects, urbanists, people who decide in the France after war, they want to modernize and to get a stronger country because they have a very, very harsh memory of what happened during the war. So this policy lead to building industrial new town, and I'm sorry, the slides isn't complete. You can't see all. You can't see all what I've written. Well, you see, you can't see.
Aber gucken Sie, it's not. Oh.
You see, it has moved.
I just know. Oh, it's always like this.
Well, you. You can.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Maybe it was made with Microsoft.
It was a Mac, and it's.
It's maybe another program.
Well, I carry on like that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which one is it? Where were we? We cannot change this so fast.
Oh, okay.
I'm very sorry. It's always like this. No.
No, the
This is
photographers,
yeah.
okay,
Photographs,
okay.
okay. It's just
Photographers are
Like
okay.
you make it like this for this text, and
Yes,
then you make
yes.
Bildschirmpräsentation.
So, this public policy deals with industrial Newton. The idea is to build palaces for the working class. The Ministry of Logement said in 1945, Eugène Claudius Petit, we have to build palaces for the working class, exactly that word, and to build hygienist new towns is in suburbs, because the image of suburbs was very negative. It was said they were black, they were dangerous, people get sick in the suburb. So the project is partly an hygienist project. You can see in Paris and suburbs, but you have to think that this policy is also done around Lyon, Lille, around all French towns. All the new buildings from 1950 to 1965, all those new buildings are mainly grands ensembles, large housing estates. The most symbolic one is Sarcelles, which you can see here. It's almost 20 kilometers from Paris. Argenteuil in the red belt, and it's all what is now called the 9-3. You know, that department which has a lot of problems. So those new buildings around Paris, some of them inside Paris, but they are smaller inside Paris, larger outside of Paris. This is the beginning of large housing estates in France. Bobigny, small units, new streets, and this was built in the 50s, at the beginning, in the middle of the 50s. Another aspect you have to remember, because it is very important, the policies, this urban policy was also done to modernize French building industry, French concrete industry. So this is one of the first attempts to build with in concrete piece of concrete slabs. This is what is called secteur industrialisé in the center of Pantin. Pantin is a little suburb town just on the outskirts of Paris, and it still exists. Another sort of building just around what is called now the périphérique. Around the périphérique, you have a lot of towers of social housing to give an apartment, a new modern apartment to the mal logés, all the people that had no place to live in the towns, especially in Paris. The tower of public housing just on the périphérique. I told you about Newtown. This is Mourenx. Mourenx is a complete new industrial town on a gas field in the south of France, near the Pyrenees, completely built in the 50s to lodge, to house workers, engineers, to create a new industrial sector. Another aspect of those large housing estates policy is, you can see the tower of public housing near the forest. This was built by for workers of car industry, Simca, which was a mark of cars, and the towers are paid by the Simca industry to put only in the towers workers of the car industry. And a lot of those places were built like that. It is a sort of paternalism but in towers instead of industrial towns. Another place where you can find a lot of grand ensemble is in the middle of towns, that we had around Paris, what was called the Paris Red Belt. Paris Red Belt was a belt of communist municipality all around Paris, and most of those, the local mayor and so on, they choose to imitate DDR or imitate Russia. They have contact between architects, communist French architects, and they went to Russia, they went to Berlin to see what was done. And when they come back, they built those grand ensembles in the middle of the old town. Same thing, Argenteuil, housing estates in the Red Belt, just in the middle of the town. And those sort of paysage urbain spread all over the suburbs from the middle of the 50s to the 70s. At that time, at the same time, where France tried to modernize the building, the industry, this building, which is called the CNIT, Center for New Industry and Technology, which is the first building built in the place called La Défense, which is the quartier d'affaires in the west of Paris. All that is built in the same time, at the same time, sorry. Housing estates is a urban project, but it is also a social project to give a new everyday life for workers and middle class of French families with children born during the baby boom, and to house people who come back to France after the fall of the colonial empire, I mean Tunisia, Morocco, and mainly Algeria. Social project, it is the beginning of French families having cars in the 60s. They don't have cars before. So the streets and the places are, you have parkings which are new in the French suburbs, and you have deux chevaux, which is a car for, a cheapest car for wages family of. So those buildings goes with cars. A new place, a new function for women. Women can go to supermarché, a new way of shopping, completely different of shopping in the old center of towns. A new place for children. This is a postcard. Children should have fresh air, should have trees, and shouldn't be inside the old smoky town. They have to do sports and so on. So it is all that children and women should live in those new grands ensembles. Just quickly what I consider with Sarcelles as a sort of paradigm of housing estates, a city called Les 4000 à La Courneuve. It is a communist council, a communist town of the Paris Red Belt, and it is built by the office of Paris and not by the local office on land owned by the Paris municipality to settle poor people out of Paris, to take poor people out of Paris and put them in the 4000 à La Courneuve. So just a few glances about this one. A postcard when it has been completely built. This is what is interesting is that it shows it is built by Paris in La Courneuve, and it is Paris, the Paris office that put the inhabitants in La Courneuve. The plan, the map, the building, we have seen something like that, the crane path technique. The building, industrialization of concrete slabs, the same thing. Like you can see how it was built. And when it was at the end of the building, with some art, urban art in the middle of the towers. La Courneuve is also famous because a famous picture movie called de Jean-Luc Godard called Deux ou trois choses que je sais d'elle has been shot in La Courneuve, and it is a very hard critics of the life in the Grand Ensemble, of the life of women in the Grand Ensemble. This is taken from the picture movie, and the woman, the actress Marina Vladi, she lives in the Grand Ensemble, and she became a prostitute in Paris to pay the rent that her husband cannot pay. And this picture movie, Deux ou trois choses que je sais d'elle, became very famous and became a very famous critics of Grand Ensemble in the 60s. This is a picture taken from the film, and Godard represents the 4000 with, you see, food and Dash, Ajax, and so on, all things of the société de consommation that begins at that time. And he also criticized the place of man and the place of women. In Grand Ensemble, the man is only washing his car all the day, all the weekend, when the wife stays in the flat. At the same time, we have a lot of large housing estates built, but at the same time, little detached houses, what we call pavillons, are still built in France during all the period. So you have to remember that those two urban forms were possible at the same time. After those critics, in 1973, Ministry of Housing stops the building of Grand Ensemble, 20 years after the beginning of that policy. And the critics we have seen, and a lot of change explain that decision of the Ministry of Housing. French families of wage owners slowly quit the housing estates to buy their own single-family house in the outskirts of towns. Immigrants quit the bidonville, the shanty town, to enter public housing, and they were not in public housing before. And at the same time, unemployment and disindustrialization of all industrial suburbs, since the economic crisis of 1973, 1979. You have a new things that wasteland in suburbs. This is a Plaine Saint-Denis. So, some of you may know, this is a Plaine Saint-Denis in the 70s. The Plaine Saint-Denis was an industrial place. Industry disappears completely. It is the place where you have now the Stade de France and a lot of building with bureaux and so on. But in the 70s and 80s, nobody knew what to do with those places. Those grand ensembles slowly get dirty. They are not, the maintenance is not done. You have cars, and very early, earlier than some people think, some urban riots started first around Lyon, and then, well, I will not explain all those, became slowly a sort of chronic phenomenon in the large housing estates. This is Lyon in 1981, but you can find a lot of photos of that kind. In front of that problem, a new politics has been decided since 2003, which is called la Loi Borloo, which is still going on. And la Loi Borloo has created the National Agency for Urban Renewal, l'Agence nationale de rénovation urbaine. And this National Agency of Urban Renovation does several things in very degraded, distressed areas. It builds, it makes renewal of buildings, it blows up a certain number of towers and slabs, and they also do what they call résidentialisation, which means nothing except that they try to make the place safer. This is the program going now, 2015-2016. You see, it's a very important program. It touches almost all the grand ensembles français, all around the territory. This is a number of programs of renewal in all France, in Paris region, made by the ANRU, Agence nationale de rénovation urbaine. And to show you just an example of what they do, they put down all, they blow up or they put down all city, Cité de Surville. And this is large housing estates where urban riots took place in 2007. And I will show you what is the action of Agence nationale de la rénovation urbaine. Bon. Sorry, but it has disappeared. No, I had two other slides, but they have disappeared.
Yeah, I don't know. But this one? You already
No,
had, no?
two. to show what they have done with that.
I don't know. It's not there.
Bon.
I just sorry. It's not there. I cannot do anything. I mean, here's something.
Yes, there's two
What, pictures?
Yes, with two pictures. Well, it doesn't matter. It was to show how they were transforming Villiers-Belle in new small units, safer, with green and so on. I'm sorry, they have disappeared. And the last one was sprawl, urban sprawl, to remind you that now the most important way of urbanization in France is urban sprawl in small detached houses. Thank you.